Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon Venus hour, and the moon is applying to conjoin Jupiter, but square Chiron. So I still don't have a moon talisman because it's supposed to be looking like a classic, almost moon talisman. Um, but it's not. I know that I'm going to have colleagues that are going to do talisman today. I know that for sure, and I absolutely support those who are not like super sensitive. Um, that can probably work. Um, but I avoid the square to Chiron and Aries. I have natal placement square in Aries, so you see it as like each person and their own. And Venus is 26 degrees Leo, Mars 25 degrees Libra. I want to talk about something. First of all, I mentioned the Bildenberg. Uh, Bildenberg is having a transit of Pluto square Saturn, Neptune, Saturn in conjunct their natal Saturn, and Uranus in conjunct their natal Saturn. This one needs to go almost extended, and a lot of the folks that are associated with folks there are running to elections right now, and a lot of the folks are supporting all kind of rituals. So let me talk about sexual sovereignty and make certain things clear, because I know that with the astral field and every time there are, all those things that are thinning up the veil, and Saturn Neptune definitely thins up the veil on a worldly scale. It's kind of like a spiritual colonialism, or before a colonialism, spiritual expedition. Okay? And think about when people travel. Um, and so when people travel, they mingle. Let's say if you're a boy traveling, I don't know, to another country, you mingle with the boys, and then they get the girls, and you learn from them how to get the girls, and then the girls seems all jovial, and you're having the time of your life, and so on. And little did you know the before, during, and after of those girls afterwards, and you think you're the man, and everybody thinks you're the man, and then nobody really knows what's happening, what's next. So there can be varying degrees, particularly if there were all kinds of induced psychosis, whether with drugs or whether even with sexual transmutation. Okay, a lot of folks who practice sexual transmutation can go to induced psychosis, and the intentions behind they don't necessarily have to be that terrible. Okay, I'm not talking like there can be horrid things, but when it comes to sexual sovereignty, and this is going to be very important also for leaders running to an election in October. When it comes to sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter, it's not about getting her excited about your fantasy. And this is so challenging because a lot of folks are running to elections, and when you think about sales, or when you think about marketing, and when you think about charisma, a lot of it is about getting people excited about your ideas. And so there's a different thing to you being excited about your idea, and it's a completely different thing where you try to get another person excited about your idea, and that has to do with the sexual or erotic rapport. Now, I'm not saying that for some people it would work only in the case where what you like and what the other person likes, if you think about them as two circles, whatever in those two circles is creating that, kind of yoni shape. Okay, if there is a yoni shape created within that yoni shape, that's basically your space. if it is willing consent and so on. But if there isn't, okay, trying to force one would create the friction and experience that sexual boundary violation creates. Okay, and now just to make it more clear, even when people self-pleasure, and they don't really and something like that's being done on them, or necessarily that they feel like they want I don't know, penetration, and then they try and they're not exactly ready, that also causes yeasts. When we tend to that, it's kind of like, hey, do you understand what is actually being ready? And a lot of people make those gray zones, but when it's two people and there can be disempowerment, there can be induced psychosis. This is where people can actually, um, you know, have various levels of trauma. Now, when it comes to the rituals that are being done to try to get the other people's sexual energy and power with their ritual, okay? So, let's say you're running an entrepreneurship or you're running a business or you're supposed to be elected to something, I don't know what. People try to harvest it's kind of like people trying to summon the energy of many people to support their manifestation. Now, here's the thing. If you talk about that, people are going to have their own conglomerate. I'm going to give you an example. I was working for a sex positive um, courses that had to do with all the things that I'm talking about. And we had a meditation. And in the meditation, we are supposed to think both of what we want for ourselves and make a contribution to the business, kind of like a tiny ergregore. So I was using some lavenders because I got intuitively to do so. And what I received in that meditation was to take the second course of aromatherapy. And so this is an example for something that can absolutely be supportive, but you must take into account that each and every sovereign is sovereign. It's not going to be, you're not directing a movie, okay? And for those of you that are going into politics, you're not directing a movie, okay? You're leading a party, you're not directing a movie, and or you're leading a campaign and not directing a movie, and this means that the sexuality of other people cannot be subjugated to you. How are you going to go about it? I don't know, but I'm here to kind of like, hey, if you pay attention to what I'm saying and apply it, you are reducing your susceptibility to run the risk of all that energy being turned up upon you, used for your assassination, used to threaten you, to stifle you, to make it impossible for you to actually get to the positions that you want to be in, because you're creating antagonism the minute you violate the sovereignty, even if you were, let's say, speaking with people, maybe you would find a way to integrate those two circles, whether erotically or in terms of idea. And why do I say that this is so important before elections? We're going to have a solar eclipse on the 21, and Mercury is already getting close. Mercury is on Al-Qaid, and the sun will be approaching, and then the moon. And it's going to be opposing Saturn and Neptune. So Saturn and Neptune can give us sort of a fog. Reaching induced psychosis, whether by sexual transmutation or drug-induced sexual transmutation, can relax the person's psyche, and it's not, now if you do it in a certain setting, you're not aiming at another person, it may relax your setting about what is possible, and it can actually manifest good things in one's life. That being said, when you try to get another person, let's say there's not even conscious, sometimes that is sleeping even, into those things and into those practices, what's happening is that if I go along a trajectory of full-blown rape to full-blown like orgasmic willing consent, you're mixing way more rape timelines than you okay, than you probably think that you are when you are in this induced psychosis state. And then it's gonna be like, okay, that was an epic fail. Okay, so um, yeah. Now again, some people don't necessarily have bad intentions. Kind of like, oh, how do I get this person to enjoy and me to enjoy? And they think about a certain fantasy, and it's kind of like, wait a sec. Maybe that person is in another part of the world and they're sleeping right now. Um, so Plus, I have to admit, Mars is opposing Chiron, so there's a wound around sovereignty. Mars may have, I don't know, a good idea in Libra, and with Venus in Leo, okay, it wants to be the king, it wants to be the this, it wants to be the that, okay, but when it comes to the opposition to Chiron, Chiron is about Andromeda constellation, and there's another thing that people need to take into account when it involves sexuality, particularly the genitals. And I think it works regardless of gender affirming. Okay, because those Mars, Aries, the I am identity. Okay, now it's also the mind and the mindset of the person. Now, a lot of people are in secret societies that kind of work by Nazi ideology. If your secret society believes in slavery, your secret society believes in masters and slaves, if your secret society is somehow having sects that act to harm women or to have child marriages or to normalize pedophilia, um, it means that when you are partaking in sexual transmutation, the ergregore of that society is mixing with your head, and you basically, because those are also personality codes, and what it means that you a lot of timelines get into your own sexuality that you wouldn't necessarily let in had you been conscious and sexually sovereign and safe. Okay. Now, I know a lot of the people that go into that, they're targeted individuals. They are in lockdown conditions. They are going through many things. And this is why I put this video out there in the form and in the way that I do. Now, Venus is sextiling Mars in Leo, the Sun in Virgo. It means that we are purging a lot of, how should I say that? The leaders that are associated with the outdated trajectories of rituals, particularly before election, they run the risk of being purged. Now, this is why I'm putting this video out there, because it's not about the person, it's about the personality cult, and it's about purging certain rituals. Now, because there's so many entanglements and so many behind the scenes of each and every campaign, then, you know, there are just so many things that go into that. But this is something that's really important to address, because as far as the lobbies, the financiers are involved, they can purge the leader. Okay, like they don't, like, even though the problem is them, they can purge the leading of the party or the leading of the ritual. And even though the problem is the ritual, the problem is not the person. There's so much that goes into these things. Again, Mars is in sextile with Lilith. And see, now that the Moon and Jupiter are squaring Chiron, again, there can be a lot of beliefs that are even popular beliefs that are like, oh, what do women of this culture think? Oh, what do women in this country want? Oh, what do this? And it's kind of like, no, each and every individual have their own thingy. So, like, we're really addressing the taboo things, but again, we have to remember this Mars is going through things. And again, being an astrologer is such a gift at this time, because I could just like, what is happening? Look at the chart. Okay, Mars is opposing Chiron. Mars is opposing Chiron. People are taking drugs and seeing that that's not really yielding. And now let's talk a little bit about the Bildenberg chart, because the Saturn in the Bildenberg chart, which is, yes, around Scorpio, I think it's around the ascendant now. is experiencing, and this is something that nobody alive experienced, okay? Vulcan with Saturn in Scorpio. I'm also one of you. And 1954, we also had a Saturn in Scorpio. And then, but now we have an out of bounds Pluto squaring this Saturn while Uranus is in conjuncting, while Saturn and Neptune are in conjuncting. Saturn in the Bildenberg chart rules over, amongst other things, Chiron. And Chiron in the Decan, where people have this God complex because they go through a ritual that they don't even know what's this ritual. For example, when I was purchasing a Thema Mundi talisman, there was this headless rite. And again, it is stated it is meant for advanced magicians and so on. So, and I just began to read about this headless rite, and I'm like, okay, that's actually my natural state of things that I need to discern myself from other. Because I guess that rite was done on me when I was a baby or something, or infant, or maybe in the womb. I don't know. And so what's happening is that this is a decan that's very associated with the headless rite, because it's a decan where, as Austin Coppock, who did a talisman of that decan, explains, one can see themselves as both the chessboard and the players and the mastermind behind the chessboard. This is the decan of underneath gloved hands. But having a Chiron, this is the Bildenberg's chart, having a Chiron on that decan, and they do work with the occult, so they have a Chiron on the underneath gloved hand, and now they're scheduled to get caught red-handed, but by an out-of-bounds Pluto. Everything that I said about this induced psychosis state, where another person that doesn't know astrology that well, that doesn't know about these things that well, they would go into full-blown experiencing rape, and they would bifurcate. Those rituals are actually the rituals they do to split identities in a more extreme form of them. And so when we talk about the last decan having a Chiron and a Saturn in Scorpio going to a square of out of bounds Pluto, it means that the place where people psychosexually experience themselves as both the chessboard and the players and the this and the that, and this is where a lot of what people call narcissism stems from, the ability to discern identity is basically reduced and compromised. This is why this decan is still in square relations with the Andromeda constellation and the last decan of Aries, which is where the I am gets to shine, like they are the center of the circus, and they are fully aware of who they are, and they shine as who they are. Okay, so we understand that square relation between being all these things, and the reason for being all these things, the reason for the headless rite, is that so one could be able to be both themselves and another thing, and move that other thing in a way that they desire. Now, on a very, very relaxed notion, when there is a discernment of the sovereignty, that can be used for attunement, and that can be used for rescuing people. But when there is no sovereignty and not discernment of the sovereignty, and by the way, it's also not discernment of the sovereignty of oneself. A person becomes an ergregore, okay, and this is what, and the wound around that, it means that the people in the Bildenbergers, shout out to Arnhem, are tapping into those energies, having tremendous horrid rituals done on them, eager to experience love, connection, orgasm, erotic rapport, and all those needs are absolutely like It's not just normal. It's just like this is what we should be experiencing in life, while coming to that deacon with lack of embodiment. It's a deacon that requires so much groundedness and embodiment, and even then things can go wrong, and they come into that deacon um, with that reaching the egregore from a disadvantaged place. Now, because those are the billionaires that bridge Europe and United States ergregore, because that's what it's said to do. It's said to have United States business milieu or decision-making elite trying to understand one another with European decision-making elite and creating an egregore that is a common ground that they agree upon. Now, they're not to blame for the dumb fuckery ritual practices from worshiping Mammon and indigenous rights, okay? Indigenous, because all these things is derived by indigenous people rights, and then refining and learning and trying. And the thing is, when people are on the level of like being a billionaire or whatnot, then they try, and even when it comes to chaos magic, okay, they try on a certain if you think about also those who study Kabbalah, so the occultistic part of Kabbalah is about the God being everything, and they're supposed to encompass that everything. And um, and now that is being squared by an out of bound Pluto. So this is, and those things, for example, when there is a right, not only that, the veil is thinning. And so the people that don't know where it's coming from would have all kinds of weird experiences, sometimes in their dreams, sometimes, I don't know, for me, like Pluto is in the 12th house, so I reach, it's for me, the dream state would be the Pluto aspect. And for other people, it's other things. Um, but they're going through this with the mindset of embodiment of everything, while there are a lot of Nazi trajectories and a lot of archaic um, only men, masters and slaves, and it's not even its predecessor. It's the predecessors of even the Jews. Okay, whether it's the Nordic tribes, whether it's American indigenous tribes, whether it's the colonized tribes, a lot of folks will have to do a lot of procyon work. Okay, it's not for nothing that my previous episode opened with the chart of Esther Perel and her Venus on Procyon, because those attempts to understand the everythingness are also perpetuating that. Also perpetuating that, and in a very real way, the surrounding egregores are purging this set of egregores for obvious reasons. Children being raped, organ harvested from babies, people being tortured in the womb. It's like, okay, there's obvious reasons that people don't want that when they go into relaxed arousal, take some nice herb or something like that, and expect to have this beautiful orgasmic body, heart, mind, and soul, and have a good night's sleep with a myriad of ideas to live a better life and make a contribution, and live in an elated, orgasmic, ecstatic, grounded, embodied state, which is kind of like golden ages. It's kind of like the basis, but in dark ages and all those practices, people just haven't had access to that. And there are many people in the world that have at least part of them that knows there's so much more to life. all this is happening while we have Epstein lists and the death row case, because Saturn Neptune has been since 2012, and now it's going to go back and forth, and Neptune Saturn, okay, leaking stuff, and people don't even know who they were, and all you see that all of these things coming into the forefront, and people naturally wondering, because think about the conscious level of people being business people, decision makers, working in a think tank group. Basically, this is what the Bildenberg is. It's a think tank group, with a lot of weird rituals, but that's what it is. It's an ergregore. It's a think tank group, um, on an occult level, and this is where a lot of people are, you know, they have it in the conscious mind that they're like, they don't even know how to explain these things to themselves, let alone explain it in a way that other people understand. And each and every person have um, their own things that convince them, their own level of embodiment, because and now this is, I have to admit, before 2008, I dealt with that. I was working for a high-tech company, running a campus for a lady that was pregnant, and I was working there for a couple of months. And there were beside me working women that made, the salary that they made was enough for food, and the husband would take care of the rest. And they just came to work. They didn't even need to work. They came to work just to chat with one another. And I looked around me and I saw, okay, women prefer to make certain choices that absolutely work for them. And I have a different trajectory. So, what would be, perhaps I would need to go into man level salaries or man profession, where men usually get paid more, and then I would just mingle with those people, and so it was kind of like I was being aware that not everybody sees feminism in the same way. Not everybody has the same needs, and not everybody feels like she needs to go to a crusade over making money that will be enough for her to run a family if she, God forbids, need to. And for a woman is not standing in the situation where she thinks like about the future, or she's running the investments. A lot of women usually do the accounting, and a man's doing the owning, um, is not going to go into the same thinking as a woman that has dealt with what I was dealing with, which made me, go up the rank, and deal with a lot of things that are on a higher level management. Like, for example, a founder of an insurance company being addicted to basically sex, gambling, and so on, having part in the intelligence, and running a company where the budget to pay his employees in a way that would support the business and support the employees is just not there, because the money goes missing. Okay, now think about this small company and this very familial person who would make us, he would cook us meals and so on, and think about the national debt of the United States. Okay. So I'm putting this video out there, partaking in that egregore and understanding that all the milieu of the Bildenbergs are going through something that is forcing them to deal with them being survivor of ritual abuse, whether satanic or not, that their occult practices are currently being purged. And in those crisis situations, the first thing that people tend to purge is the leaders. Kind of like, okay, people are not really going to vote. They're not really programmed to have this type of orgasms anymore. They're not into that. And then replacing the population didn't work because the people complain about what the indigenous people do. The indigenous of the other region. Okay? And putting them in death and concentration camps and shushing about it is also not really yielding, because people are talking about it internationally. And everybody's like, okay, what do we do? And all at the same time of not really feeling like a lot of things are very sudden. Okay, it is in conjunct with Uranus, and Uranus Sedna. So everybody needs the Arctic both because it's the only place where it's not, where Russia is not to the north and Russia is not to the northeast of, which is kind of important when you try to run a world war when Russia is not on your side. Okay, and then there are the things that it affects Trump's business, and then there are the minerals, and many things Arctic, or I don't know, whatever technologies. HARP, I think, is also in Nordic countries. And they've managed not to have storms in the oceans, which is actually improving the situation for shipping. But I don't know what is the effect of. They managed for 2 weeks, which is amazing. It means that the ship can go most of the way from Europe to United States unbothered, and that is very good for the life of those that sail the ship, particularly when they are refugees or something that they need to be transported from one place to another, warships and so on. But we don't really know the effect on the climate, okay? We can computate, we can have approximations, but most of the Vulcan would have an unbalanced sexual energy, which is, and we need a balanced embodied sexual energy and channeling to have the right gnosis, occult wise. Now, this is something that a lot of the people that have been exposed to Neptune Pisces, they learned how to channel, they learned how to manifest, they learned a little bit of magic, they learned, okay, all these things. They begin to see what's working for them and what sometimes even in their teachers' teaching is actually intervening. Actually, one of the occultists that I bought talismans for and I learned a lot of astrological magic from had a Pluto opposing their ascendant, with Aries squaring it right now until pretty much, well, the coming 20-25 years, and at least Neptune trining, Neptune and Saturn trining, and so while they're having a Uranus opposition, it happened. And so if I think about basically their occultistic practice, Pluto, and how it was standing in the way of their own embodied self, and that caused a lot of drama. Again, all of those are crises of success, crises of growth, and so on. But this is like, hey, me seeing that, not really getting the trajectory. What's happened to this person? What's happening with this person? They were like, and then seeing the other trajectories. So think Bildenberg and think out of bounds Pluto. And all of it is happening suddenly. So the best I can do is put that video out there. My Pluto is relating with you, okay? My Pluto is basically in that conglomerate with the Saturn of the Bildenbergs and the Marses that are, yeah. Um, so this is where there's just a lot of trajectories happening, and all the while attempts to like really control every single facet of the population. Vulcan, when those ergregores sexually harass slash assault slash try to put hypnosis into someone to like something that they're not necessarily into, or that the fact that it was done in that way was not really creating the environment, even though maybe that was not intentional, but whatever. Okay, and I'm going to a second what Light says about the no. She talks about personal connections, but the notions that some people think that everybody is playing a game. Now, I don't blame the Bildenbergers thinking that everybody's playing a game. But you have to take into account that you're crossing that ergregore threshold, and even in by the thinning of the veil, because you're trying to affect the we the people, and we the people have been listening to Esther Perel, taking relational courses, taking how to speak to my vagina courses, taking embodied self pleasure tantric practice courses, you know, yeah, learning anger management, resolving their ancestral curses and whatnot, learning money mindset. Okay, they're not playing games, and they have gnosis that it looks like, oh my God, what right? Who taught this person a cult? How did they get to that? How are they able to tame those spirits that have like, no, they're not taming anything, because to begin with, they were dealing with their fragmentations in a way that is close enough to the problem so that they can see the problem for some of them, far enough from the problem so that they can bring the solution. Okay, the Abraham Hicks thingy. And now you're running, you've crossed the threshold of people playing games. And first of all, I just think about the think tank solution, where, people have to think how Machiavellian is that person and how to get them to agree to, let's say, for example, the Rockefeller, they agreed to have women rights in the Civil War because they could tax also women. Okay, and so just think about the diplomats and the decision makers that had to bridge the fact that there is an ongoing civil war. You're going to lose all your property to people who will do guillotine on you, and this time, and you're not really winning the race, to having all the ego and the structure and the occultistic. Even when I think back to the story of Anneke Lucas, I think she talked about one of the Rockefellers having a spiritual experience, and therefore decided not to slaughter her. She was a child, and so that didn't matter because the children are expandable, and she was supposed to be expandable. Then she was taken away, and then she was rebelling the people who tried to program her. And so now, okay, so now there is suddenly, first of all, I was thinking about it. What is the source of the problem for the leaders? They were supposed to serve one master, the lobbyers, financiers, and deliver the message so to look as if they are serving another. And now they're actually supposed to at least not get in the way of we the people, and that includes we the people. When I wrote about the sky that punishes the land loses mandate of the heaven, be it Mao or we the people, I was not joking. Also, the people that have these beliefs are also dealing with that, because what happened? A person would go to the land, even in the land of Israel or the land of Europe. All they know is the wife is causing a mess. You beat the wife, so there will be peace. Okay? They didn't know how to deal with that. That's what they had. So they beat the wife. Now she's silent. The kids are silent. Everything is okay. And you go back to work to make some money, drink some alcohol, and then you do whatever you do. She thinks it's rape. You don't understand what she's talking about because you barely remember last night. And then you go and do that in Germany, and you're in jail for the rest of your life. Now think about the elite. Thailand. I reside in Israel. I ride the Israel Railway. A couple of men sitting in front of me, speaking amongst themselves. What happens in Thailand stays in Thailand. What happens in Thailand is they are raping young girls. Now, I don't know what level of rank they are. Maybe those young girls are being trafficked and tortured to make them feel comfortable about raping those young girls. They're already fragmented, And another thing that I want to say, the people that practice all those soul emptying occultistic practices, when they come to market their whatever it is that they do, whether it is a person that have, I'm not going to spark this, people think I'm talking about them, I'm not. Whatever it is that they come to market afterwards in their companies, what people experience is avoid talking to you and having to preserve their light and energy. Okay? So Bildenbergers might know how to deliver the message in a way that it is coming across. Okay? But this is where, and a lot of it had to do with Mossad, the 001. I saw their courses. They're having courses to the public to learn techniques of the intelligence. The CIA is doing similar things. Falcon, those occultistic practices feel like a void that you need to avoid. To put it simply. So, and other than that, a person in another constellation or another situation, they could be a hot person, they can be a sexy person, they can have erotic, but they do those practices. It's kind of like there is the void that brings and manifests, and there is a void where it's about, soul deprivation. Soul deprivation is not yielding. Also financially, Venus is yielding, but even if those rituals where they're supposed to like bring a woman to pleasure and give that to the god or something like that, it's not willing consent because she's being sacrificed. Okay? Sexual sovereignty is a part of sexual pleasure. Now, a lot of people were programmed differently, and for them, it would feel like they don't really know what happened, but they kind of enjoy part of that and kind of didn't, and they're not really sure. That's the sexual sovereignty operating. Okay, that's the sexual sovereignty radar that's being activated. Because it can be the mixture of, because they try to tap and hack into nervous systems, and no, that's not sovereignty. It's not the real deal. It has to be with meeting our emotional needs, embodied sensual expression, having the ability to say yes, no, and maybe without having, malefic implications to that, on a resource level. And so, um, when it comes to winning an election, I have to admit, I have a lot of compassion for the candidates, because if they meet even their women colleagues, those women wouldn't know, you know, what is she talking about? Because that would confront them with so many things. For example, the fact that they don't really need to take that comedy, or I said what I said. It's a bunch of medication. Okay, a little jab at the Medicis. Meloni wants to, and I really, and by the way, I really support her. Okay, ideas that there are many ways to reach good goals. So, Meloni wants to have a treatment to pedophiles that they will be able to go through some sort of a chemical castration, that is not always final, by the way. And I think she wants to use the the class lawsuits thingy. But my jab at that was, because they understand they're going to have to treat pedophilia. And they're not getting people to normalize that. It doesn't work. So, and so she's being, pragmatic and authentic. And I'm like, well, of course she's a Medici. She's going to solve everything with drugs. So, where's my Procyon? Procyon, Procyon, Chasumun, Procyon. Sweeten, sweeten what I said, sweeten what I said. Anyway, um, but you see, when those things and practices get to the common people, we're gonna know. And really, when it comes to the leadership positions, first of all, they dealt with so much dumb fuckery that the common person is not even aware of, while the common person believes, and sometimes is right, that they are so detached from the common person's problems because they are dealing with um, the sex workers that they go to in Japan. Okay, and what they have to endure, and so they are aware of those problems. But the thing is, and later the common person's problem seems like, oh, that's nothing. Much more important to solve these problems, which is why I posted my previous episode about the nervous system and the gate, and the the gatekeeping of orgasm, gate projects. But also how to undo that, because it's the vagus nerve and it's the nervous system. So a lot of ideas, um, and again, there are always going to be those who try to entrap people into control fabrics, and the backfire that happens, and now the backfire begins to happen, and it's a sudden, with out of bounds Pluto, with Uranus and Sedna. In Sedna in Gemini, with Saturn Neptune having an expiration date to a lot of the things that a lot of the control tactics that the Pluto out of bounds is running through. And whenever I make an episode, a lot of people, again, they remember the torture that they have been through, and it's triggering, and sometimes it's even fear. Okay, like I talked about Sharon Tate. It's like, yeah, you would have to watch what happened to her, and so on and so forth. It was like, wait a second, wait a second. The wealth is shifting. The people responsible are changing. The Bildenbergers need to have a new chart that is actually benefic, and I'm going to try and think and come up with a good chart for such think tank groups and ergregores, and the ergregores need to be way more sovereign. We can't be doing the third, we can't, those who work underneath gloved hands run the risk when they do it on a worldly scale to have conflicting ideologies, conflicting, and now it's all a part of the process. When you think about creating peace, it is a part of, we are supposed to speak with each other. We are supposed to have a common language that can be translated not by erasing the differences. And control is not going to do the deed. Is not going to do the deed. To get people to think together and so on, and also we need to be inclusive, because as the old saying goes, the person that is disincluded from the village will burn the entire village to feel its warmth. And what if that village is global? Okay, and so a lot of the people that were still like the Me Too went too far and cancel culture and so on, like, Folket, you had time. Some of these people are my generations, not even the Bildenbergers. Some of these people are my the Bildenbergers. They were like, they would go to study yoga and would go to this and would go to that and so on, and eat better and yes, but then if they still have to be in interface with trafficking and pedo rings, even their own souls begins to manifest the healing and the recovery. So that is a part of why the Epstein lists are out, by the way. It's not just the victims healing, it's also the perpetrators. And the Falcon that went by those ways, we saw Charlie Kirk literally having Saturn on the deacon, where if people are not saving the children, they could literally die. And Saturn means death, and he indeed died. He was assassinated by those expandable children MK Ultra projects, because the shooter is expandable. But at the time of the shooting, it seems like there is a relief. And when they know that they are shooting at the person is also a perpetrator, okay, I'm not talking about Charlie Kirk, but about, and it's enough that they've seen a footage that was from once in a. Now the Bildenberger are stressed for a reason. However, just tapping into and maintaining the frequency of the sexually sovereign ergregore, not trying to invert them, not trying to Lucifer on them, not trying to Baphomet on them, not the God needs to embody the rapist and the this and the that and so on, okay? Just tapping into that is Golden Age's frequency, and that is the bubble that the bubbles are popping because this thing is because this is the real deal. And a lot of people have their ego attached to their previous rigorous practices and can think about is it helping to transmute trauma, not by perpetrating trauma to other and begin to refine the occultistic practices, okay? I've seen, for example, Aleister Crowley was associated with Nazi ideology that was raping girls. I've seen women practice the feminine archetype, calling themselves an occultistic telema. Obviously, they practice different Crowley things, okay? Obviously, they're not doing Crowley the way Adolf Hitler and folks did that. The people that had to play Hitler. I did not know that. Thank you, Anneke Lucas, because I did not know what it means. And I'm pretty damn sure that the person that's getting to induce whatever is not always aware of what's happening. And or think that this is funny. For example, in Model UN, I resided in Israel, so I had to play Iran and Iraq. So as far if they could do, for example, a Model UN historical, and we did historical, and I could be doing an interface of Model UN, and what if Model UN was working, had an historical, I don't know, something during Nazi Germany. Of course, the UN did not exist then, but kind of like they play with a lot of scenarios that are good for international relationships. So I would have to, if I would have to play, let's say, Nazi, and by the way, I did play Germany, but not Nazi Germany, when next to me was United States. And then I would have to come with the Nazi boots and the mustache and take the best of amphetamines to play Hitler. Charlie Chaplin did that, and Charlie Chaplin, thanks Chris Brennan, has the same chart as Adolf Hitler. Has almost the same chart as Adolf Hitler. Chaplin got to be an artist. Hitler got to do art differently. Both probably raped children. There are folks who actually think Hitler wouldn't be on the Epstein list. I mean, come on. Was Eve Brown programmed? Very likely so. So Yeah. So even the ritual of putting somebody in Hitler costumes is probably associated with those rituals also when it's done outside of the circles of those secret societies. There were even people that thought that I'm a part of the secret society. Nope. Um, and yeah, they're trying to get people to do the peace symbol, which is associated with the secret societies. I thought it was just peace or whistleblower, and as many people think. And one of the really harsh stories, I had a colleague, someone who studied with me in academia, and she had a child that was doing the peace sign. That it's not just the two genders, just double agent and all those. And she asked, "What is it for the child?" And the child said, "It's the ears of the rabbit." And this is where I like really encourage the mother to look into MK Ultra. But this is the most that I could do. For if you know, you know. Okay, those people are. Um, so yeah, this is. I always refer to the survivors, to the testimonies, and it's those welfares that kidnap those children to these things, and it's at the juncture of therapy that they meet those things. It's not like the 60s, folks. It's not like the 70s, not like the 80s. When Dr. Miller was just writing her book and running into people that were ritually satanically abused, learning with them what the fuck happened. Um, Back then, you could still run into a therapist, and that therapist will still have some leeway to work, death threatened and so on, but leeway to work. Nowadays, it's not the same. Not the same doing another Gladio operation. It's not the same. People have to heal in spite of therapy, and they basically are. Every testimony is another free healing teaching, and build up the ability to be sovereign. Okay, because when I just remembered just about a year ago, um, I ran into the AI, and could AI replace the head of NATO with a picture of Mark Rutte that was not even taking the role of the head of NATO back then? Like, he knew that he would be taking that role, but he was not even going through kind of like the equivalent of inauguration. And I'm like, okay, then that means that all these folks are going to be expandable. Knowing, as Annika Lucas said, in certain echelons, you either have to be one of them, or very, close your eyes when you know that those things are occurring in your vicinity. And it's highly unlikely that people can survive in those echelons without participating, even if they're not conscious of that.